The wind in Chicago has a name. The old heads call it the hawk. Because it doesn't just blow, it hunts. It waits for you at the corners of intersections, sharp talons of ice ready to tear through whatever flimsy polyester blend you bought on clearance at TJ Maxx. Shanice Williams felt the hawk's teeth right now, biting through the thin utility coat she had worn for 3 winters straight. She ducked her head, pressing her chin into her chest, trying to preserve the tiny pocket of warmth trapped between her scarf and her neck. She checked the crack screen of her Samsung. 11:48 p.m. The numbers glowed with a malicious neon brightness against the gloom of the street. "Lord, please," Shanice whispered, her breath blooming in a white cloud before being snatched away by the gale. "Not tonight. Don't let me be late tonight." She had exactly 12 minutes. 12 minutes to cover 3 city blocks. 12 minutes to get to Mrs. Jenkins' apartment on the 3rd floor of the crumbling brick walk-up on 5th Street. 12 minutes to pick up her 6-year-old son, Tyrell, before the clock struck midnight. If she arrived at 12:01 a.m., Mrs. Jenkins, a woman who claimed to be a saint on Sundays but counted every penny like a loan shark on weekdays, would charge the after-hours fee. $20. $20 was nothing to the people in the high-rises downtown, the ones whose offices Shanice scrubbed until her knuckles were raw. To them, $20 was a salad. To Shanice, $20 was 3 days of groceries. It was the difference between keeping the lights on or sitting in the dark. It was the difference between Tyrell having new socks or wearing the ones with holes in the toes. Being a black single mom in this city meant living your life on a timer that never paused. It meant calculating the distance between paychecks down to the cent. It meant swallowing your pride when the manager shorted your hours, and swallowing your pain when your feet felt like they were bleeding inside your non-slip shoes. Shanice adjusted the strap of her heavy tote bag, wincing as it dug into her sore shoulder. She looked at the main street. The sidewalk was icy unplowed. If she took the main way, she'd be fighting the wind the whole time. She'd be late. She looked at the alley to her left. It was a narrow throat of darkness running behind the old textile factory. It smelled of wet cardboard, grease, and bad decisions. The streetlights didn't reach back there. "Just keep moving. Heavy feet, light heart," she muttered to herself, a phrase her grandmother used to say when the world got too heavy. Shanice stepped off the curb and into the alley. The silence here was different. It wasn't quiet, it was heavy. The roar of the city was muffled by the brick walls, replaced by the steady rhythmic drumming of the freezing rain on metal dumpsters. Plink, plink, plink. Shanice walked fast, her boots splashing through puddles of oil-slick slush. She kept her head down, her eyes scanning the ground for broken glass or rats, her keys laced between her fingers in her pocket. A weapon she prayed she'd never have to use. She was halfway through, passing the overflowing dumpster behind the Chinese takeout place, when the color stopped her. In a world of gray slush, black trash bags, and brown brick, the flash of emerald green screamed for attention. Shanice paused. Her boots sank into the freezing mud. "Keep walking, Shanice," a voice in her head warned. "You got Tyrell to think about. You got 12 minutes. Don't look. Don't stop. Trouble loves a woman who slows down." She took a step forward. But the green moved. It was a small, frantic twitch, like a wounded bird trying to lift a broken wing. Shanice let out a sharp breath. She stopped. She turned her head slowly, peering into the shadows between the rusted dumpster and the wet brick wall. "Oh hell no," she breathed. She stepped off the pavement and into the muck, navigating around broken pallets. The green fabric was silk. She could tell even in the dark, the way it shimmered, the way it draped. It was a dress. A party dress. And inside the dress was a child. Shanice dropped her tote bag into the filth without a second thought. She fell to her knees, the icy water soaking instantly through her jeans, shocking her skin. "Hey!" Shanice called out, her voice dropping from tired worker to gentle mother in a heartbeat. "Baby? Can you hear me?" The bundle shivered violently. It wasn't just a tremble. It was a full-body convulsion that rattled the child's bones. A vibration Shanice could feel through the ground. The child didn't look up. She was curled into a tight ball, her face buried in her knees, trying to make herself disappear. Shanice reached out, her hand hovering over the girl's shoulder. "I ain't gonna hurt you. Promise. But you gotta look at me, sweetie. You're gonna freeze to death out here." Slowly, painfully, the girl lifted her head. Shanice's heart stopped. The girl was tiny, maybe 7 years old, Tyrell's age. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light, and her dark, wet hair was plastered to her skull like ink. But it was her eyes that froze Shanice's blood. They were wide, almond-shaped, and black as the void, filled with a terror so absolute it looked like madness. She looked like a porcelain doll that someone had smashed and tried to glue back together. "Oh, sweetie, look at you," Shanice cooed, fighting the urge to cry. "You're an icicle. Come here." The girl flinched, scrambling backward into the brick wall, her heels scraping against the pavement. Her mouth opened. She looked like she was trying to scream, to beg, to say something. A sharp, ragged gasp tore from her throat. The sound was awful. It was a dry, broken wheeze, like a rusted hinge forcing itself open. The girl clutched her throat, her face twisting in frustration and panic. Tears, hot and fresh, spilled over her freezing cheeks. She tried again, her lips moving to form words, her small chest heaving with the effort. She strained, but only a faint, pained hum escaped her lips. Nothing came out. The words died in her throat, choked by a fear so deep it had severed the connection between her brain and her voice. Shanice's eyes narrowed. She knew that look. She had seen it in the kids at the shelter where she used to volunteer before Tyrell was born. The kids who had seen things no one should see. She can't speak proper. It wasn't a sore throat. It wasn't a cold. It was shock. The kind of silence that comes after trauma. "It's okay," Shanice said softly, inching closer. "I ain't gonna make you talk. You don't have to say a word." She didn't hesitate. She unzipped her coat, her only shield against the bitter cold, and stripped it off. The wind hit Shanice's damp work uniform like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She gasped, her teeth instantly beginning to chatter, but she didn't stop. She wrapped the warm, body-heated coat around the shivering girl, pulling the hood up over the wet hair. "There. That's better. I'm Shanice. I'm a mama just like yours. You safe now." As she buttoned the coat around the tiny frame, her fingers brushing against the silk dress that cost more than Shanice's rent, she felt something hard digging into her ribs. The girl was clutching her fist against her chest so tight her knuckles were white. "What you got there, baby? Let me see." The girl hesitated. She stared at Shanice's face, searching for a lie, for a threat. But she saw only the tired, warm brown eyes of a woman who knew what it was like to be cold. Slowly, the girl uncurled her frozen fingers. It fell into Shanice's hand with a heavy clink. It was a card. But not paper. It was heavy matte black metal. The edges were sharp enough to cut skin. Shanice tilted it toward the distant streetlight at the end of the alley. There was no address. No company logo. No slogan. Just a name embossed in silver letters that seemed to glow in the darkness. Lucian Kim. And a number. Beneath the number, someone, the child likely, had scratched a word into the metal with a rock or a key. The letters were jagged, desperate, and uneven. "Appa." Shanice stared at the card. The breath caught in her throat. Lucian Kim. Even in the South Side they knew the name. They called him the Silk Razor. The Afro-Korean ghost who ran the shipping yards, the tech district, and the parts of the city the police were afraid to patrol. He was a myth. A monster. A billionaire who walked in shadows. Shanice looked from the card to the mute, terrified girl shivering in the mud. "You belong to Lucian Kim?" Shanice whispered, the horror sinking in. "Lord have mercy." She checked her phone. 11:53 p.m. She had 7 minutes to get Tyrell. If she called the cops, they would keep her here for hours. Tyrell would be scared. Mrs. Jenkins would throw a fit. And worse, if the rumors about Lucian Kim were true, calling the police might be a death sentence. If his enemies were looking for this girl, the police station was the first place they would check. Shanice looked at the girl's face. She saw the bruises forming on her wrists. She saw the way the girl flinched at the sound of a distant car horn. "All right," Shanice said, her voice hardening into steel. "We doing this the hard way." She dialed the number. The phone rang once. "Speak." The voice was a low baritone, smooth like expensive whiskey, but with a cold metallic edge. It didn't sound like a man who answered his own phone. It sounded like a man who commanded the airwaves. There was no hello. No hesitation. Just a command. Shanice didn't flinch. She was a mother from Chicago. She had stared down drug dealers, slumlords, and debt collectors. A voice on a phone didn't scare her. "My name is Shanice," she said, her voice cutting through the wind loud and clear. "I don't care who you are or what you run. I'm in the alley behind the old textile mill on 5th. I have your daughter." Silence. The kind of silence that feels like the air being sucked out of a room. It lasted for 2 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. "Repeat that," the voice said. The smoothness was gone. It was pure jagged violence now. A predator realizing its den had been breached. "I said I have your daughter," Shanice snapped, her patience fraying as the cold seeped into her bones. She pulled the girl closer, rubbing her arms through the coat. "She is wearing a green silk dress that is ruined. She is shivering in the rain so bad her teeth are rattling. And she can't speak proper to tell me who hurt her because she is traumatized. So you need to get down here." "Is she bleeding?" The question was rapid-fire, desperate. "No. She's freezing. I gave her my coat, but she needs a hospital or a heater, not a conversation." "Stay exactly where you are," Lucian ordered. The authority in his voice was absolute. "If you move her, if you touch a hair on her head—" "Boy, don't you threaten me," Shanice interrupted, her mama bear voice coming out in full force. The man on the other end of the line stopped breathing. "Nobody interrupted Lucian, Kim. I am the only thing standing between your baby and hypothermia right now," Shanice hissed. "I am wet, I am cold, and I am late to pick up my own child. You have 5 minutes. If you aren't here, I am walking her straight into the 9th precinct, and I don't care who you pay off. I will scream your name to every reporter I see. Try me." She hung up. Shanice stared at the phone, her hand trembling slightly. She had just threatened the most dangerous man in Chicago. She had just hung up on the devil. "Well," she muttered to the girl, pulling the child onto her lap to share body heat. "If I'm gonna die tonight, at least I died doing something right." The girl looked up at her. For the first time, the terror in her eyes softened just a fraction. She leaned her head against Shanice's chest, listening to the rapid thundering beat of her heart. They waited in the rain. It didn't take 5 minutes. It took 3. The sound came first, not sirens, but the deep guttural roar of high-performance engines. The wet pavement vibrated beneath Shanice's knees. The water in the puddles rippled. 2 black SUVs tore around the corner of the alley, their headlights blindingly bright, cutting through the rain like lasers. They moved with aggressive precision, boxing Shanice and the girl in against the brick wall. Shanice shielded the girl's eyes with her hand. "It's okay. Stay close to me." The doors of the lead SUV flew open before the wheels had even stopped rolling. 4 men poured out. They moved like water, fluid, synchronized, lethal. They wore tactical suits that cost more than Shanice's apartment. They had earpieces, guns on their hips, and eyes that scanned every shadow in the alley in a split second. They raised their weapons. "Don't you dare!" Shanice screamed, tightening her grip on the girl. "She's a child." But Shanice didn't look at the soldiers. She looked at the man who stepped out last. He was tall, over 6'2", and he commanded the rain just by standing in it. Lucian Kim. He was a striking, terrifying collision of his heritage. He had dark skin that glowed with a copper undertone, and high, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass. His hair was styled in intricate, neat cornrows that pulled back into a bun, revealing a face that was devastatingly handsome and utterly devoid of mercy. He wore a charcoal suit that was tailored to perfection, with a long wool coat that billowed behind him like a cape. He didn't look at Shanice. His eyes, dark and frantic, locked instantly on the small bundle in Shanice's lap. "Hannah!" The shout was raw. It wasn't the voice of a mafia don. It was the voice of a father who had seen his worst nightmare come to life. He crossed the distance in 2 long strides, ignoring the mud ruining his Italian leather boots. He fell to his knees in the slush, his hands reaching out, trembling. "Hannah Agaya," he whispered, the Korean endearment slipping out desperate and soft. "Look at Appa. Are you hurt? Who touched you?" The girl Hannah looked at him. Her mouth opened. She tried to speak, to say Appa, but the block in her throat held firm. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she let out a frustrated, silent sob. Lucian's face contorted with rage. He looked up at Shanice, his eyes shifting from father to killer in a nanosecond. "What did you do to her?" he snarled, his voice vibrating with violence. Why isn't she speaking? Shanice didn't back down. She was still sitting in the mud, cold and wet, shivering in her thin uniform, but she held his gaze. I didn't do nothing but keep her alive, Shanice said, her voice steady. She's in shock. She's trying to talk, but the words are stuck. You yelling at her ain't gonna help. You need to calm down before you scare her worse. Lucian looked stunned. Nobody spoke to him like that. Not his men, not the police, and certainly not a woman in a soaked work uniform in a back alley. He reached out to take Hannah. Give her to me. But then something impossible happened. As Lucian's hands touched the girl, Hannah flinched. She let out a sharp, terrified squeak and scrambled backward, away from her father and into Shanice's arms. She buried her face in Shanice's chest, clutching the cheap uniform fabric, refusing to let go. The silence in the alley was deafening. The 4 guards shifted uncomfortably. Their boss, the man everyone feared, the man who controlled the city, had just been rejected by his own daughter in favor of a stranger. Lucian froze. His hands hovered in empty air. The pain on his face was so raw, so naked, that Shanice almost felt sorry for him. Almost. She doesn't know me, Lucian whispered, his voice cracking. Why is she afraid of me? Shanice rubbed Hannah's back in slow, soothing circles, feeling the girl's heart hammering against her ribs. She ain't afraid of you, Shanice said, her voice softening. She's afraid of everything right now. And you coming in here with lights and guns and shouting. That's too much noise for a quiet hurt. She needs calm. Shanice looked at the powerful man kneeling in the mud. He looked smaller now. You want her to come to you? Stop being the boss. Be the daddy. Lower your shoulders. Soften your eyes. And for God's sake, tell your stormtroopers to back up. Lucian stared at her. He looked at Shanice, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the fatigue under her eyes, the worn-out shoes, the shivering shoulders. He saw the fierceness in her jaw. He raised a hand. Instantly, the 4 guards took 3 steps back and turned around, creating a perimeter of privacy. Lucian lowered his shoulders. He took a deep breath, letting the rain soak his expensive coat. He didn't reach for Hannah this time. He just sat there waiting. Okay, he said, his voice dropping to a velvet whisper. Okay, I'm listening. Shanice looked at her watch over Hannah's head. 12:05 a.m. Well, listen fast, Shanice said. Because I'm late to pick up my own son, and if you make me miss my baby, then you and I are gonna have a real problem. Lucian Kim blinked. A corner of his mouth twitched. Confusion? Amusement? You have a son? He asked. Yes. And he's waiting. So, are we taking this baby to a hospital? Or do you have a doctor in one of those fancy trucks? Lucian stood up, the power returning to his frame, but the aggression dialed down. We have a medical suite at my estate. It's 5 minutes away. He extended a hand to Shanice, not to take the girl, but to help Shanice up. She won't let go of you. So you are coming with us. Shanice looked at the hand. It was manicured, strong, and dangerous. Taking it meant crossing a line she could never uncross. It meant entering a world she had spent her whole life avoiding. I can't go with you, Shanice said. I have to get Tyrell. Mrs. Jenkins charges by the minute. My men will pick up Tyrell, Lucian said, and it wasn't an offer, it was a decree. They will bring him to the estate. He will be safe. But my daughter needs you. And I. He paused, looking at Hannah clinging to Shanice like a lifeline. I am in your debt. And I do not leave debts unpaid. Shanice hesitated. She looked at the shivering girl. She looked at the rain. She thought of her empty fridge and the late fees. She took his hand. If my son is scared even for a second, Shanice warned as he pulled her to her feet, I will burn your world down. Lucian Kim looked at the fierce, exhausted woman standing in the mud. For the first time all night, a genuine dangerous smile touched his lips. I believe you would, Shanice, he said. Get in the car. The leather seats of the SUV didn't smell like car seats. They smelled like bergamot, cedarwood, and gun oil. It was a rich, masculine scent that filled the cabin, stifling in its intensity. Shanice sat on the edge of the seat, her muddy boots resting gingerly on the plush floor mats that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Hannah was curled into her side like a barnacle, her face buried in Shanice's damp shirt, refusing to look at anything else. Across from them in the rear-facing seat sat Lucian Kim. He hadn't spoken since they got in the car. He had merely issued a series of rapid-fire commands into his phone in Korean, his voice low and lethal. Now he was watching them. His gaze wasn't predatory exactly, but it was heavy. It was the look of a man who was used to appraising things, risk, value, loyalty, and finding them wanting. He watched Shanice stroke Hannah's matted hair. He watched the way Shanice's hand trembled slightly from the adrenaline crash. Shanice refused to be intimidated. She stared out the tinted window. The city blurred past. They weren't heading toward the hospital district. They were heading north, toward the Gold Coast, the neighborhood of old money, iron gates, and private security patrols. Where are we going? Shanice asked, breaking the silence. Her voice sounded too loud in the quiet cabin. My home, Lucian said. My medical team is already prepping the suite. And my son? Shanice demanded, her heart skipping a beat. You said your men would get him. How do I know he's safe? How do I know they didn't scare him? Lucian tapped the screen of a tablet mounted on the console between them. He swiveled it around so Shanice could see. It was a live video feed. The interior of another SUV. In the back seat, Tyrell was sitting in a booster seat that looked brand new. He was holding a juice box in one hand and a Nintendo Switch in the other. He looked confused but not scared. A large man in a suit was sitting next to him, pointing at the screen, helping him with a level. Wow! Tyrell's voice came through the speaker, tinny but clear. I got the star. Mama, did you see? Shanice let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 20 minutes. Tears pricked her eyes. He was safe. He was warm. He is unharmed, Lucian said softly. He turned the screen off. My head of security, Marcus, is with him. Marcus has nieces. He knows how to handle children. Shanice looked at Lucian. The anger in her chest uncoiled slightly, replaced by a wary exhaustion. Thank you, she said stiffly. Do not thank me for ensuring the safety of a child, Lucian replied, his eyes darkening. It is the bare minimum. The SUV slowed down. Shanice looked out the window. They had turned off the main road onto a private drive. Massive iron gates, easily 20 feet tall, swung open silently. They were flanked by stone walls topped with cameras and sensors. This wasn't a house. It was a fortress. The driveway wound through manicured grounds that looked black in the storm, leading up to a sprawling structure of glass, steel, and dark stone. It was beautiful, cold, and imposing. We are here, Lucian announced. The car stopped under a heated porte-cochere. The door opened instantly. Shanice tried to move, but Hannah tightened her grip, letting out a small, fearful whimper. It's okay, baby, Shanice whispered. We just gonna go inside where it's warm. Mama Shanice is right here. She stepped out of the car, carrying the girl. The transition was jarring. 1 second she was in the storm. The next she was standing in a foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment building. The floor was black marble, polished to a mirror shine. A massive chandelier, modern and sharp like icicles, hung from the ceiling. Staff members were waiting. A line of them. Sir. A woman in a severe gray suit stepped forward. The medical team is in the West Wing. Lucian nodded. He turned to Shanice. Go with them. They will check her vitals. They need to get her body temperature up. Shanice hesitated. She looked at the severe woman, then at the marble floor. She felt painfully aware of her mud-caked boots and her cheap, wet clothes. I can't pay for this, Shanice blurted out. The words hung in the air, clumsy and honest. I don't have insurance that covers. Whatever this is. Lucian looked at her. For a second he looked confused. Then, his expression softened into something that looked almost like pity, which Shanice hated more than his anger. Shanice, he said quietly, you saved my daughter's life. You will never see a bill as long as you live. The medical suite was terrifyingly sterile. It looked like an ER but cleaner and with better equipment. 3 doctors and 2 nurses swarmed Hannah the moment Shanice laid her on the exam bed. They were efficient, professional, and completely cold. Heart rate is elevated, one doctor muttered. Core temp is 96. Mild hypothermia. Start the warming fluids. They began to hook Hannah up to monitors. They tried to peel the wet silk dress off her. Hannah panicked. Her eyes flew open. She thrashed, ripping the sensors off her chest. She opened her mouth to scream, but the sound was still locked away. Instead, she clawed at the air, her face twisting in silent agony. "Restrain her," the lead doctor ordered. "We need to get the 4 in. Don't you touch her," Shanice roared. She shoved a nurse aside, gently but firmly. She climbed onto the bed, ignoring the mud she was smearing on the pristine white sheets. She pulled Hannah into her lap, wrapping her arms around the flailing child. "Back off," Shanice commanded the doctors. "Give her a minute. You're treating her like a pincushion. She's a baby." She rocked Hannah, humming a low, vibrating tune deep in her chest. It was an old gospel song her grandmother used to hum. "Peace be still. Peace be still." Slowly, the thrashing stopped. Hannah's breathing hitched, then slowed. She buried her face in Shanice's neck, inhaling the scent of rain and cheap laundry detergent. Shanice looked up at the doctors. "You want to check her? You do it while I'm holding her. And you explain what you're doing before you do it." The lead doctor looked at Lucian, who was standing in the doorway, watching the scene with unreadable eyes. Lucian nodded once. "Do as she says." The exam took an hour. Shanice didn't move. She let them listen to Hannah's heart, check her pupils and wrap her in heated blankets, all while she whispered nonsense stories about a brave little rabbit who outran a storm. Finally, the doctor stepped back. "Physically, she will recover," he told Lucian. "No frostbite. The hypothermia was caught just in time." But what?" Lucian asked, his voice tight. "She is mute, sir. Selective mutism. It's a trauma response. Her vocal cords are functional, but her brain has shut down the speech center. It happens in cases of extreme terror. We can bring in a speech therapist, but it could take months, years." Lucian looked at his daughter, who was now asleep in Shanice's arms. He looked like a man who had been punched in the gut. "She spoke this morning," Lucian whispered. "She told me she wanted pancakes. And now—" He turned and walked out of the room. Shanice waited until the nurses finished settling Hannah into a real bed. Then she gently untangled herself from the girl's grip. "I'll be right back, baby," she whispered. "I gotta find Tyrell." She walked out into the hallway. Lucian was waiting for her. He was leaning against the wall, staring at a painting of a storm at sea. He held a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "My son," Shanice said. "He is in the kitchen," Lucian said without looking at her. "Eating pizza with Marcus. He is happy." Shanice nodded. "Then I need to get him and go. It's late. I have work in 6 hours." Lucian turned to look at her. "You scrub floors at the Jenkins Tower, correct? And you work weekends at the logistics center." Shanice stiffened. "I told you, stop investigating me." "I investigate everyone who enters my home," Lucian said. He pushed off the wall and walked toward his office door. "Come in, Shanice. We need to talk business." "I don't do business with you," Shanice said. "You do now," Lucian replied. "Because you are the only person on this planet who can make my daughter stop screaming." Lucian's office was a room of shadows, mahogany, and leather. It smelled of power. He walked behind his massive desk and pulled a folder out of a drawer. He slid it across the surface toward the empty chair opposite him. "Sit," he commanded. Shanice remained standing. "I prefer to stand." Lucian sighed. He sat down, looking weary. "Shanice Williams. Rent is $1,200 a month. You are 2 months behind. You have a disconnect notice for your electricity dated yesterday. Your son Tyrell is bright, but his teacher reports he falls asleep in class because your schedule is chaotic." Shanice felt the shame burn hot in her cheeks. It was one thing to be poor. It was another to have a billionaire read your poverty back to you like a grocery list. "Is there a point to this humiliation?" she asked, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Or do you just get off on kicking people when they're down?" "I am not kicking you," Lucian said calmly. "I am assessing the leverage. And I am offering a solution." He opened the folder. It was a contract. "I want to hire you." Shanice blinked. "Excuse me. Did you see what happened in that room?" Lucian gestured toward the medical suite. "My daughter is terrified of me. She is terrified of the doctors. She is terrified of the air. But she is not terrified of you." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. I am offering you a position. Live-in governess and caretaker for Hannah. You and Tyrell will move into the east wing of the estate. It is a fully furnished apartment. Tyrell will attend the private academy down the street. Tuition paid in full. You will have a salary of $10,000 a month. The number hung in the air. $10,000. That was more than Shanice made in 6 months. It was a life-changing amount. It was freedom. It was new shoes for Tyrell whenever he wanted. It was never worrying about the lights going out. But it was also blood money. She knew who Lucian Kim was. I can't work for you, Shanice said. I'm a janitor. I'm not a whatever this is. And I can't bring my son into a house that has armed guards at the gate. The guards are there to keep the danger out, Lucian said. Your neighborhood has shooting statistics that are higher than some war zones, Shanice. Is Tyrell safer there? Walking past drug dealers to get to school? Or is he safer here behind 12-foot walls? It was a low blow. But it landed. Shanice thought of the sound of gunshots she heard last week while putting Tyrell to bed. She thought of the way she made him sleep in the bathtub sometimes, just in case stray bullets came through the window. What do I have to do? Shanice asked. Make her speak, Lucian said. His voice cracked, the veneer of the Mafia Boss slipping for just a second. Be the mother she lost. Make her feel safe enough to find her voice again. Where is her mother? Shanice asked. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lucian's face hardened into a mask of stone. That is not part of your job description, he said coldly. Do we have a deal? Shanice looked at the contract. She looked at the signature line. She thought of the Shivering girl who couldn't say Appa. She thought of Tyrell eating pizza in a warm kitchen. I have conditions, Shanice said, finding her courage. Lucian raised an eyebrow. Conditions. 1. My son is off-limits to your business. He sees nothing. He hears nothing. 2. I don't answer to your guards. I answer only to you. And 3. If I ever feel like we are unsafe even for a second I walk. And I take the severance pay. Lucian looked at her. A slow respect dawned in his eyes. You negotiate better than my lawyers, he said. He stood up and held out a pen. Agreed. Shanice took the pen. Her hand shook, but she signed her name. Shanice Williams. She had just signed a deal with the devil. But looking at the zeros on that salary, she figured maybe the devil wasn't so bad if he paid for private school. 2 hours later, Shanice was settling Tyrell into a bed that was shaped like a race car. The East Wing apartment was bigger than her entire building. It had a kitchen, a living room, and 2 bedrooms with ensuite baths. Tyrell was asleep instantly, worn out by the excitement and the pizza. Shanice couldn't sleep. The silence of the mansion was heavy. It felt oppressive. She walked out of the apartment, down the long carpeted hallway toward the room where they had put Hannah. She needed to check on the girl one last time. The house was dark, lit only by low recessed lights near the floor. As she passed Lucian's study, she noticed the heavy oak door was slightly ajar. A sliver of light spilled out onto the carpet. She heard a voice. Lucian's voice. But he wasn't speaking English. He was speaking Korean. Shanice paused. She knew she shouldn't listen. But the tone of his voice stopped her. It wasn't the calm, cold voice of the boss. It was the frantic, hushed whisper of a man who was scared. She crept closer. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the emotion. Rage. Betrayal. Then Lucian switched to English. I checked the logs, Marcus, Lucian hissed. The gate wasn't forced. The alarm didn't trip. Someone used a clearance code to open the perimeter. Shanice froze. Hannah didn't just wander out, Lucian continued, his voice shaking with fury. She was taken. And the only people with that code are you, me, and the shift commanders. A pause. Find the leak, Marcus. Find them tonight. Because whoever took her, whoever put my daughter in that alley, is inside this house. Shanice backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She turned and ran silently back to her room, locking the door behind her. She slid down to the floor, pressing her hands over her mouth to stop her breathing from being too loud. She looked at Tyrell sleeping in the race car bed. She had thought she was bringing him to safety. She thought the walls were there to keep the monsters out. But she was wrong. The monster was already inside. 3 days later, the Kim estate felt less like a fortress and more like a tomb made of gold. Shanice had settled into a routine, but it was a routine built on eggshells. The staff, mostly older women in starched uniforms and large, silent men in suits, watched her with cold suspicion. To them, she was the outsider. The stray cat the master had let in. They whispered when she entered rooms and fell silent the moment she looked their way. "Ignore him," Shanice told Tyrell as they walked down the grand staircase for breakfast. "They just mad 'cause we got the good juice." But Hannah was different. Hannah was a shadow that had attached itself to Shanice's leg. The little girl refused to be more than 3 feet away from Shanice at any given time. She slept on a cot Shanice dragged into her room. She ate only if Shanice took a bite first. And the silence persisted. The can't speak proper issue wasn't just mutism. It was a physical block. That afternoon in the sunroom, Shanice was braiding Hannah's hair. The sunlight caught the dust motes dancing in the air. It was quiet, peaceful. "You got pretty hair, baby," Shanice murmured, her fingers working quickly through the dark strands. "Thick. Strong. Like your daddy's." Hannah flinched at the word daddy. Her shoulders climbed up to her ears. "It's okay," Shanice soothed, not stopping the rhythm of her hands. "He's just loud. Men are loud. My daddy was loud too, used to sneeze like a shotgun going off." Hannah relaxed slightly. She turned her head, looking up at Shanice with those wide, dark eyes. Her mouth opened. She took a breath. Her lips formed a shape. Shanice stopped braiding. She held her breath. "Yeah? What is it?" Hannah's face twisted. The frustration was immediate and violent. She grabbed her own throat, her fingers digging into the skin, her eyes watering. She pushed the air, trying to force the sound out, but it hit a wall. She let out a frustrated huff and buried her face in her hands. Shanice gently pulled Hannah's hands away from her neck. "Hey, none of that. You ain't broken, Hannah. You just buffering. Like a video when the Wi-Fi is bad. It'll load when it's ready." Hannah looked at her, confused by the analogy, but she stopped crying. Shanice realized then that it wasn't just fear. It was a specific trigger. Hannah tried to speak when she felt safe, but the moment she thought about why she was silent, the block slammed down. "We gonna fix it," Shanice whispered. "But we gonna do it my way. No doctors. Just us." That night, the insomnia hit Shanice hard. The silence of the mansion was too loud compared to the sirens and street noise she was used to. At 2 a.m. she gave up on sleep. She wrapped herself in a silk robe provided by the staff that felt too slippery against her skin, and crept down to the kitchen. The kitchen was industrial, all stainless steel and marble, glowing blue in the moonlight. Shanice opened the massive refrigerator. It was stocked with things she couldn't pronounce. Truffle butter. Wagyu beef. "Rich people don't eat cheese sticks?" she muttered, moving a jar of caviar aside. "Bottom drawer, left side." Shanice jumped, spinning around. She grabbed a jar of artisan mustard as a weapon, holding it up like a grenade. Lucian Kim was sitting at the kitchen island, almost invisible in the dark. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt. His hair was loose from its braids, falling in dark waves around his face. He looked younger. He looked exhausted. "Lord have mercy." Shanice pressed a hand to her chest. "You wear a bell or something?" Sneaking up on folks in the dark. Lucian offered a tired, faint smile. "It is my kitchen, Shanice." "Well, it's my heart attack," she retorted, putting the mustard down. "What are you doing up?" "Thinking," Lucian said. He swirled a glass of dark liquid. "Drinking." Shanice found the cheese sticks in the bottom drawer. She grabbed 2 and walked over to the island. She sat across from him, peeling the plastic wrapper loudly. "She tried to talk today," Shanice said. Lucian's head snapped up. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a laser-like intensity. "What did she say?" "Nothing. She couldn't get it out. But she tried. She wanted to tell me something about her hair." Lucian slumped back. "She used to sing," he whispered. Before she was taken the first time. She never stopped talking. She was a bird." He looked at Shanice, his eyes vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "I built this place to keep her safe," he said. "Sensors. Guards. Blast-proof glass. And yet, she ends up in an alley shivering. You can't build walls against hate, Lucian, Shanice said softly, tearing a string of cheese. And you can't build walls against bad luck. You just gotta build a home inside the walls. Lucian looked at her. He looked at her bare face free of makeup, her hair in a bonnet, eating a cheese stick in his multi-million-dollar kitchen. You are a strange woman, Shanice Williams, he said. You are afraid of nothing. I'm afraid of everything, Shanice corrected. I'm afraid of failing my son. I'm afraid of being broke. I'm afraid of the dark. I just don't let it stop me. Lucian reached out. His hand brushed against hers on the cold marble counter. His skin was warm. Thank you, he said, for bringing her back to me. The air between them shifted. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something heavier. Something magnetic. And then the world exploded. Crash. The sound came from the front of the house. It wasn't glass breaking. It was the sound of a heavy vehicle ramming into metal. Then came the sirens. Not police sirens. The internal security alarm. Intruder alert. Sector 1. Breach. Red emergency lights flooded the kitchen, bathing Lucian's face in blood-colored light. Get down! Lucian roared. He moved faster than Shanice thought possible. He tackled her off the stool, covering her body with his as the kitchen window, bulletproof glass, shattered under a hail of automatic gunfire. Oh! Bullets sparked against the stainless steel appliances. Shards of glass rained down on them. Tyrell! Shanice screamed, scrambling against the floor. My baby! Stay here! Lucian commanded, dragging her behind the heavy marble island. He reached under the counter and pulled a handgun from a hidden holster. My men will handle it. My son is in the East Wing. Shanice yelled, shoving Lucian off her. Her fear had turned instantly into a feral panic. I ain't staying nowhere. She tried to stand. Lucian grabbed her ankle. Shanice, wait. They are in the hallway. Shanice didn't care. She kicked his hand away. She looked around for a weapon. The mustard jar was gone. She saw the pot rack hanging above the island. She grabbed a heavy 12-inch cast iron skillet. I'm getting my kids, she snarled. She took off running. Lucian cursed in Korean and sprinted after her, gun raised. They burst into the hallway. It was chaos. Smoke filled the air. The sound of gunfire echoed from the foyer. Two men in black tactical gear and ski masks were at the end of the hall. They weren't fighting security. They were moving toward the bedrooms. They were coming for the children. Hey! Shanice screamed. The two men spun around. One raised a rifle. Lucian fired. Bang! Bang! The man with the rifle dropped, clutching his leg. But the second man was closer to the door. He kicked the door to the kids' room open. No! Shanice didn't stop. She didn't slow down. She ran straight at the gunman. He turned, raising a pistol. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, perhaps surprised to see a woman in a bonnet charging him with cookware. That second was all Shanice needed. She swung the cast iron skillet with two hands, putting every ounce of her fear, her rage, and her love for Tyrell into the motion. Clang! The sound was sickeningly loud, like a church bell ringing in hell. The skillet connected with the side of the gunman's helmet. The man's head snapped to the side. His knees buckled. He dropped to the floor like a sack of cement and didn't move. Shanice stood over him, heaving, the skillet raised for a second hit. Lucian skidded to a stop beside her. He looked at the unconscious gunman. He looked at the dent in the man's tactical helmet. He looked at Shanice. Did you just... Lucian started, his eyes wide. Open the door. Shanice screamed. She dropped the skillet and threw the door open. The room was dark. Tyrell? Hannah? Mama? A small trembling voice came from under the bed. Shanice dropped to her knees. I'm here. Mama's here. Tyrell crawled out, dragging Hannah with him. They were both crying, shaking. Shanice scooped them both up, pulling them into a crushingly tight hug. I got you. I got you. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Lucian entered the room, his gun still raised, clearing the corners. He saw his daughter safe in Shanice's arms. He lowered the weapon. He looked at the open window. The lock wasn't broken. It had been opened from the inside. They got in. Lucian whispered, realized the horror. How did they get in? Hannah pulled back from Shanice's chest. Her face was streaked with tears. She looked at Lucian. She looked at the open window. She took a ragged breath. Her eyes locked on the doorway where Lucian's head of security, Marcus, was just running in. His gun drawn, looking panicked. "Boss, are you okay?" Marcus yelled. Hannah's eyes went wide. She pointed a shaking finger at Marcus. Her mouth opened, and this time the wall broke. "Marcus," she whispered. It was faint, raspy, but clear. "What?" Lucian stepped closer. "Hannah." Hannah buried her face in Shanice's neck, but her voice rose, trembling with accusation. "Marcus," she said louder this time. "Marcus let them in." Silence crashed into the room, heavier than the gunfire. Shanice looked up. Lucian looked up. Marcus lowered his gun slowly, his face going pale. The traitor wasn't a stranger. He was the man standing in the doorway. The air in the room didn't just feel heavy, it felt explosive. The accusation hung between them, spoken in the voice of a child who hadn't spoken in years. Marcus let them in. Marcus, the man who had driven Tyrell to the house. Marcus, who had eaten pizza with the kids in the kitchen. Marcus, who had stood by Lucian's side for 10 years. Lucian didn't scream. He didn't rage. He went deadly still. A kind of calm that was far more terrifying than anger. He aimed his weapon directly at Marcus's chest. "Put the gun down, Marcus," Lucian said. His voice was a flat line. No emotion. Just an order. Marcus looked at Lucian, then at Hannah, then at Shanice. The mask of the loyal soldier slipped. His eyes hardened. He didn't lower the gun. He raised it higher, leveling it at Lucian. "She's traumatized, boss," Marcus said, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. "She's confused. The shock. She doesn't know what she's seeing." "My daughter does not lie," Lucian stated. "And neither does the open window. You have the override codes, Marcus. Only you." "I did it for us." Marcus snapped, the pretense dropping. "For the family." "You've gone soft, Lucian. You're building playhouses and hiring nannies while the Russians are encroaching on the ports. You're weak. Weak." Shanice cut in, holding the children tighter. "He's taking care of his child. That ain't weak. That's a man." Marcus sneered at her. "Shut up, cleaning lady. You're the reason we're in this mess. Bringing strays into the house." He shifted his aim toward Shanice and the kids. Bang! Lucian fired without hesitation. He didn't aim to kill. He aimed to disarm. The bullet struck Marcus's shoulder. Marcus grunted, stumbling back, his gun clattering to the floor. He fell into the hallway, clutching the wound. "Run!" Lucian shouted to Shanice. "Get them to the safe room. Now!" But before Shanice could move, shadows filled the hallway behind Marcus. 3 more guards. Men Shanice recognized from the gate. They stepped over Marcus, raising assault rifles. They weren't here to help Lucian. They were with Marcus. "It's over, Lucian." Marcus yelled from the floor, laughing through the pain. "The house is mine. The men are mine. You're dead." Lucian realized the truth in a split second. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a coup. He slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it just as a hail of bullets shredded the wood. Splinters flew everywhere. Shanice threw herself over Tyrell and Hannah, covering their heads. "We're trapped," she screamed. "Lucian, do something." Lucian was dragging a heavy oak dresser in front of the door. "The door won't hold. They have breach charges." He looked at Shanice. His suit was torn, his face bloody from the glass in the kitchen. He looked at his terrified daughter and the woman who had saved her. "I cannot win this fight," he said, the realization bitter on his tongue. "Not here. Not with them in the room." "Then we leave," Shanice said, standing up. "Where's the exit?" "The hallway is blocked. The windows are bulletproof. They don't open wide enough for an escape." Shanice looked around the room. It was a child's room. A playroom. She looked at the closet. "The laundry chute," she said. Lucian blinked. "What?" "I saw the blueprints when I was cleaning," Shanice said rapidly. "This wing has an old laundry chute that goes straight to the basement laundry room. It's wide enough for a kid. Maybe tight for us, but we gotta fit." The door buckled as someone slammed against it from the outside. Go, Lucian ordered. He ran to the closet and ripped the paneling off the wall, revealing the metal chute. Tyrell, go first, Shanice commanded, keeping her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. Slide down just like at the playground. Wait for us at the bottom. Go. Tyrell, eyes wide but trusting his mother implicitly, jumped in and slid down into the dark. Hannah, you're next, Shanice said. Hannah shook her head, clinging to Shanice. Baby, you have to. Tyrell is waiting. Go to Tyrell. Hannah looked at Lucian, then at Shanice. She took a breath and jumped. Shanice looked at Lucian. You go. I stay, Lucian said, reloading his clip. I will buy you time. You stay, you die. Shanice grabbed his lapels and shook him. And if you die, who protects them? Me? I got a frying pan, Lucian. I need you alive. Get in the damn chute. The door hinge snapped. A boot kicked through the wood. Lucian looked at the door, then at Shanice. He cursed in Korean, holstered his gun, and gestured for her to go. Together, he said. They squeezed into the chute just as the bedroom door exploded inward. They tumbled out of the chute into a pile of linens in the basement laundry room. It smelled of bleach and lavender. A smell Shanice usually associated with work, but now smelled like survival. The garage, Lucian gasped, helping her up. We take the service tunnel. They grabbed the kids and sprinted through the labyrinth of the basement. Lucian moved with a limp. He must have twisted his knee in the fall, but he didn't slow down. They burst into the underground garage. Lucian's fleet of cars sat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Maybachs. Take the SUV, Lucian pointed to an armored G-Wagon. No. Shanice stopped him. Think, Lucian. Marcus has the codes. He has the trackers. You take that tank, he lights it up with a rocket before we get to the gate. He knows that car. Lucian stopped. Then what? Shanice pointed to the far corner. A rusty beige 2010 Toyota Camry. Whose is that? Lucian asked, looking at it like it was an alien spacecraft. That's Mrs. Gable's car, the cook. She's off tonight. Does Marcus track the cook's car? No, Lucian admitted. Give me the keys, Shanice said. I'm driving. You're shaking too bad to hold the wheel. Lucian didn't argue. He broke the lockbox on the wall, grabbed the keys, and they piled into the Camry. It smelled like old cigarettes and vanilla air freshener. It was cramped, but it started with a roar. Shanice slammed it into reverse. Kids, heads down. She gunned it. Not toward the main gate, but toward the service exit. As they burst out of the garage into the storm, they saw Marcus's men swarming the main driveway. They were blocking the iron gates with trucks. They blocked the exit. Lucian shouted. Not the service exit, Shanice yelled, spinning the wheel. She drove over the manicured lawn, the Camry bouncing violently. She smashed through a wooden fence, sending splinters flying, and careened onto the back service road that led into the woods. Behind them, shouting erupted. Gunshots pinged off the trunk. The back window shattered, spraying glass over the back seat. Mama! Tyrell screamed. Stay down! Shanice yelled. She drifted around a muddy corner, the tires spinning for traction, and floored it onto the main road. She didn't turn on the headlights. She drove in the dark, guided only by the lightning flashes and sheer desperation. They drove for 10 minutes in silence, watching the rearview mirror. No headlights followed them. The rain was too heavy. The hawk covered their tracks. They were alive, but they had lost everything. 30 minutes later, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, aching reality. They were parked under a viaduct on the outskirts of the city. The rain hammered the roof of the Camry. Lucian sat in the passenger seat, staring at his hands. He looked broken. The king of Chicago, stripped of his castle, his army, and his crown. We need to go to a safe house, Lucian said, his voice hollow. I have a penthouse in River North. A stash house in the West Loop. Lucian, look at me, Shanice said, turning in her seat. Marcus was your head of security. He knows where your safe houses are. He probably has men waiting there right now with coffee and donuts. Lucian slammed his fist against the dashboard. Then where? We cannot stay here. He will track us. He has the city grid. He has the rich city grid, Shanice corrected. He has cameras in the loop. He has payroll in the Gold Coast. But he don't run the whole city. She put the car in gear. Where are you going? Lucian asked. We're going to the one place Marcus won't look for a billionaire in a beige Camry, Shanice said. We're going to my hood. Lucian looked at her. Then out at the dark, rainy streets. The South Side. Englewood, Shanice said. It ain't pretty and it ain't safe, but it's invisible to men like Marcus. Nobody looks for a king in the gutter. They drove south. The scenery changed. The glass towers disappeared, replaced by boarded-up windows, liquor stores with bars on the doors, and streetlights that had been shot out years ago. Lucian looked uncomfortable. He locked his door. Relax, Shanice said. You're with me. They pulled up to a nondescript, crumbling apartment building. Shanice parked in the back behind a dumpster. This is it? Lucian asked, looking at the peeling paint. It's home, Shanice said. Come on. Hoods up. Don't look at nobody. They hustled the kids inside. The hallway smelled of weed and old cabbage. They climbed 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. Shanice unlocked her door, 3 deadbolts, and pushed it open. The apartment was tiny. 1 bedroom, a small living room, a kitchenette. It was cold, but it was dry. Welcome to the penthouse, Shanice muttered, locking the bolts behind them. Lucian stood in the middle of the room. He looked massive in the small space, a giant in a dollhouse. He looked at the mismatched furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the table, the faded pictures of Tyrell on the wall. He looked at Shanice. You lived here? He asked softly. We live here, Shanice corrected. And now so do you. She went to the closet and pulled out blankets. She made a pallet on the floor. Kids get the bed, she said. You take the couch. I'll take the chair. Shanice, Lucian said. Don't, she stopped him. We're alive. That's enough for tonight. Marcus won't find us here. Not tonight. She checked on the kids, tucking them in. Hannah was asleep instantly, clutching Tyrell's hand. Shanice walked back to the living room. Lucian was standing by the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. He looked like a caged animal. I have nothing, he whispered. No money. No men. No power. I am a dead man. Shanice walked over to him. She didn't touch him, but she stood close enough that he could feel her heat. You got your daughter, she said. You got your life. And you got me. Lucian turned to look at her. His eyes were dark and tense. Why? He asked. Why save me? I dragged you into a war. Because you're a father, Shanice said simply. And because I know what it's like to have the whole world against you. Now sit down. I'm gonna make some grits. Lucian Kim, the silk razor, the mafia boss of Chicago, sat down on a lumpy, thrift store sofa in a 1-bedroom apartment in Englewood. He watched the black single mom turn on a stove that barely worked. And for the first time in his life, he realized he didn't know anything about real survival. But he was about to learn. Morning in Englewood didn't break. It snuck in through the cracks in the blinds, gray and reluctant. Lucian Kim woke up with a crick in his neck and a hand reaching for a gun that wasn't there. For a split second, he panicked, disoriented by the smell of old frying oil and the sound of sirens outside. Then he remembered. The betrayal. The escape. The Camry. He sat up on the lumpy couch. His tailored suit was ruined, stained with mud and blood. He looked like a king who had been dragged through a sewer. Shanice was already up. She was in the kitchenette, wearing a faded t-shirt and pajama pants, stirring something in a pot. Morning, sunshine, she said without turning around. Bathroom's down the hall to the left. You gotta jiggle the handle or it keeps running. Lucian stood up, feeling every bruise. He walked to the window and peered through the blinds. Down on the street, life was moving. Kids walking to school in groups, men on corners, old cars rattling by. I need a phone, Lucian said. I need to contact my offshore accounts. I need to freeze Marcus out before he liquidates everything. You ain't contacting nobody yet, Shanice said, handing him a bowl of grits and eggs. Eat. You look like you about to pass out. Lucian looked at the bowl. I am not hungry. I need to reestablish command. You don't have a command, Lucian, Shanice said, pointing her spoon at him. You a fugitive. And out there, you ain't the silk razor. You just a tall man in a dirty suit who looks like a mark. You go out there flashing cash or demanding phones, you gonna get robbed or shot before you cross the street. Lucian scowled. I can handle myself. In a boardroom? Sure. In a VIP room? Yeah. But on 63rd Street? Shanice laughed, a dry, sharp sound. You wouldn't last 5 minutes. You don't know the code. The code. The survival code. Don't look too long. Don't walk too fast. Don't flash nothing. And for God's sake, fix your face. You walking around looking like you want to murder the world. That draws heat. Lucian sat down, defeated. He took a bite of the grits. They were hot, buttery, and surprisingly comforting. So what is the plan? He asked. We cannot stay here forever. We stay until we know what Marcus is doing, Shanice said. And to do that, we need eyes. I have no eyes, Lucian said bitterly. My network is compromised. Your rich network is compromised, Shanice corrected. But I got a network too. She pulled a burner phone out of a drawer. It was an old flip phone. Who are you calling? Lucian asked. Police. Better, Shanice said, dialing a number. I'm calling my Auntie Doreen. Lucian watched in fascination and confusion as Shanice made a series of calls. She didn't call hackers or hitmen. She called women. Hey, Auntie. Yeah, it's Shanice. Listen, you still cleaning the offices at the chaotic bank downtown? Yeah. What about your cousin, the one who does catering? Uh-huh. She scribbled notes on a napkin. Okay, listen. I need you to ask around. Anyone working the Gold Coast shifts. Specifically the Kim estate. Yeah, the big black house on the hill. I need to know who's working the party tonight. Uh-huh. Marcus is throwing a reorganization dinner. I need to know who's pouring the wine and who's taking out the trash. She hung up and looked at Lucian. Marcus is moving fast, she said. He's hosting a sit-down tonight at the estate. The Russians are coming. He's selling your territory to them. Lucian's face went cold. He is selling the city. If the Russians take the ports, Chicago will burn. He fired all your security staff, Shanice continued, reading her napkin. Replaced them with his own goons. But he didn't fire the cleaning crew or the caterers. Why? Because rich folks don't see the help. To Marcus, the maid is just furniture. The janitor is just a ghost. Lucian looked at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. He thinks they are invisible. Exactly, Shanice smiled, and it was a dangerous smile. But the invisible see everything. My cousin V is on the catering team for tonight. She says Marcus has a server room in the basement, the brain? You call it. The mainframe, Lucian corrected, leaning forward. It controls the accounts, the blackmail files, the leverage. If I can get to that room, I can lock him out. I can drain the accounts and expose the Russians to the feds all at once. But you can't get in, Shanice said. Your biometrics are locked out at the gate. The guards have shoot-to-kill orders on you. I need a way inside, Lucian muttered, pacing the small room. A breach point. No, Shanice stood up. You don't need a breach. You need an invitation. She walked over to the closet and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside were 2 uniforms. Catering uniforms. White shirts, black bow ties, black vests. V got us in, Shanice said. We're working the party. Lucian stared at the cheap polyester vest. I am Lucian Kim. I do not serve hors d'oeuvres. Tonight you do, Shanice said, tossing him the vest. Unless you want to let Marcus sell your city and kill your daughter's future. Put on the vest, boss. The service van smelled of shrimp puffs and stale coffee. Lucian sat in the back, squeezed between a stack of trays and a woman named V who was chewing gum loudly. He had shaved his beard. He wore glasses Shanice had bought at a drugstore. He wore the uniform. And remarkably, he looked ordinary. Without the expensive suit and the aura of command, he was just another tall, tired worker. Shanice sat opposite him. She reached out and adjusted his bow tie. Relax your shoulders, she whispered. You're stiff. Service staff don't stand like statues, they slump. They're tired. Lucian exhaled, letting his posture drop. This is insane. If Marcus sees me. He won't, Shanice said. Because he never looked at you. Not really. He looked at the suit. He looked at the power. He won't recognize the man clearing his plate. The van slowed down. They were at the service gate of the Kim estate. Lucian tensed, his hand twitching for a weapon he didn't have. A guard leaned into the window. New guy. Russian accent. Catering. Standard order plus the vodka crates, V said, popping her gum. The guard scanned the clipboard, then waved them through. They drove up the service road, past the manicured lawns Lucian had paid millions for. They parked at the loading dock. Okay, listen up, Shanice whispered to Lucian as they unloaded crates of champagne. We have 20 minutes before the speeches start. That's when Marcus will be distracted. You need to get to the basement server room. I know the way, Lucian said. Not that way, Shanice grabbed his arm. The main hall has cameras. You gotta go through the laundry chutes. The ones we escaped from. Lucian looked at her with a mix of horror and respect. The laundry chutes. It's poetic, Shanice grinned. Now grab that crate. Move. They entered the kitchen. It was chaotic. Chefs shouting, steam rising. Marcus's new guards were standing by the doors, looking bored, stealing shrimp from the trays. Shanice moved with confidence. She barked orders at a busboy, grabbed a tray of empty glasses, and shoved it into Lucian's hands. Take this to the scullery, she ordered loudly. Lucian blinked, then nodded, playing the part. He carried the tray past the guards, head down, invisible. They reached the laundry room. It was empty. Go, Shanice hissed, opening the panel to the service tunnel. I'll keep watch. You have 10 minutes to upload the virus and get out. Lucian paused. He looked at Shanice. If I am caught, you won't be, she said. Because I'm gonna cause a scene upstairs that they won't be able to ignore. Shanice, no. That is dangerous. Go. She shoved him into the shadows. Shanice straightened her vest. She checked her reflection in the stainless steel fridge. She looked like a mom. She looked like a maid. She looked like nobody. She walked out into the main ballroom. It was filled with men in suits. Smoke hung in the air. Marcus stood at the head of the room, holding a glass of champagne, laughing with a heavy-set Russian man. Shanice grabbed a pitcher of ice water. She started filling glasses, moving closer to the head table. She listened. The transfer is complete at midnight, Marcus was saying. The ports are yours, Petrov. Lucian is dead. Or he will be soon. Good, Petrov grunted. Lucian was difficult. Too many rules. No drugs. No trafficking. You are smarter. Shanice felt a surge of cold rage. Lucian wasn't a saint, but he had lines he wouldn't cross. Marcus had none. She moved to refill Marcus's glass. Watch it, Marcus snapped, not even looking at her face. Don't spill. Shanice didn't spill. She deliberately knocked the entire pitcher of ice water into his lap. Oh my God, she shrieked, playing the clumsy fool perfectly. I am so sorry, sir. I am so sorry. The icy water soaked Marcus's crotch. The room went silent. You stupid cow. Marcus roared, jumping up. Look what you did. I'll clean it. I'll clean it. Shanice grabbed a napkin and started dabbing aggressively, causing a commotion, blocking his view of the service door where Lucian was sneaking back in. Get off me. Marcus shoved her back. He signaled to a guard. Get this incompetent trash out of here. And check the perimeter. I don't want mistakes tonight. The guard grabbed Shanice's arm roughly. Wait, Marcus said. He looked at Shanice. Really looked at her. Shanice's heart hammered. Had he recognized her? She had worn a bonnet at the apartment. Now her hair was pulled back. Have I seen you before? Marcus narrowed his eyes. Shanice channeled every ounce of Southside attitude she had. I don't know, sir, she said, her voice trembling just the right amount. I work 3 jobs. I scrub floors at the bank. I serve food here. Maybe you see me taking out your trash. Marcus stared at her. Then he scoffed. Trash. Yeah, that sounds right. Get her out. The guard dragged Shanice toward the kitchen doors. She didn't fight. She let him drag her. Because over Marcus's shoulder, she saw the lights in the room flicker. Once. Twice. Then the massive screen behind Marcus, which was displaying the port transfer map, went black. A giant red skull appeared on the screen. System lockdown initiated. The music cut out. The lights went full bright. Marcus froze. He looked at his phone. What the hell? Sir. A guard ran in. The accounts. They're draining. Someone is in the mainframe. Marcus spun around, his eyes wild. Lucian. He looked at the kitchen door. He looked at where the clumsy waitress had just been taken. That wasn't a waitress, Marcus whispered. That was her. He pulled his gun. Seal the exits. Nobody leaves. Kill the staff if you have to. But he was too late. In the confusion of the blackout, Shanice had stomped on the guard's instep, slammed his head into the doorframe, and vanished into the laundry chute. She slid down into the darkness, landing in the pile of linens where Lucian was already waiting, breathing hard, holding a hard drive. Did you get it? She asked. Lucian held up the drive, a feral grin on his face. Everything. His money. The Russian deal. The evidence. Then let's go, Shanice said. Before the invisible army turns into a target practice. They sprinted for the catering van just as the alarms began to scream. They had hit the king. And now the king was coming for blood. The catering van rattled as it tore down the Dan Ryan Expressway. Lucian was in the back, typing furiously on a laptop he had liberated from the server room. I have locked Marcus out, Lucian said, his voice grim. But he knows it was us. And he knows where we are going. How? Shanice asked, gripping the steering wheel. The catering van has a GPS tracker. I just disabled it, but the last ping was exit 59. Shanice looked in the rearview mirror. Exit 59 is 63rd Street. He knows we're heading back to Englewood. We need to keep moving, Lucian said. We cannot go back to the apartment. We will lead him straight to the children. No, Shanice said, her eyes hardening. We ain't running no more. My son is in that apartment. Hannah is in that apartment. If we run, Marcus catches us on the highway, and we're just targets in a tin can. So what do we do? Lucian asked. Marcus has a private army. We have a van full of shrimp puffs. Shanice pulled off the highway. She drove past the boarded-up shops and the flickering streetlights of her neighborhood. She saw the people on the porches. She saw the old men playing dominoes. She saw the young guys on the corner. Marcus has mercenaries, Shanice said. But he don't have community. He thinks this is just a slum. He don't know who lives here. She pulled up to the curb in front of her building. She didn't turn off the engine. She jumped out and whistled, a sharp, piercing sound. Mrs. Jenkins. Shanice screamed up at the third floor. We got trouble coming. A window slammed open. Mrs. Jenkins' hair in rollers leaned out. Girl, why you screaming at this hour? You owe me late fees. I owe you a war. Shanice yelled. Men coming to kill my kids. Black SUVs. Guns. That changed everything. In Englewood you can fight about rent, you can fight about noise, but you do not mess with the kids. Doors opened. People stepped out. Big Mike from the corner store. Mr. Henderson, the Vietnam vet who sat on his porch with a shotgun across his lap. The cousins. The uncles. Lucian stepped out of the van. He looked at the ragtag group of neighbors gathering in the street. Shanice, he whispered. These are civilians. They will be slaughtered. Civilians. Shanice laughed darkly. Baby, these folks survived Reaganomics, the crack epidemic, and Chicago winters. Marcus ain't ready. 10 minutes later, the convoy arrived. 3 black armored SUVs rolled down the narrow street, looking like sharks in a goldfish pond. They stopped in front of Shanice's building. Marcus stepped out of the lead vehicle. He looked furious. He had lost his money, his deal, and his dignity. He held an assault rifle openly in the street. 6 heavily armed mercenaries fanned out behind him. Lucian. Marcus roared. Come out. It's over. I know you're in there. The street was silent. Too silent. Lucian stepped out onto the stoop of the apartment building. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie Shanice had given him. He held a pistol in one hand. I am here, Marcus, Lucian said calmly. Leave the woman and the children out of this. This is between us. You don't get to make terms. Marcus raised his rifle. Kill him. Kill everyone in the building. Hey! The voice came from the roof. Marcus looked up. Mr. Henderson was leaning over the parapet, racking a pump-action shotgun. You lost, son? This is a quiet block. Marcus sneered. Get back inside, old man, or I'll drop you. Drop who? Big Mike stepped out from the alley, holding a tire iron that looked like a toothpick in his massive hand. Behind him were 5 other men, holding bats, chains, and one very rusty revolver. You ain't shooting up my building, Mrs. Jenkins yelled from the window, throwing a flower pot. It shattered right at Marcus's feet. Marcus looked around. The invisible people were suddenly very visible. They were on the porches, on the roofs, in the alleys. They weren't soldiers, but there were dozens of them. You think this trash scares me? Marcus laughed. Open fire. Marcus raised his gun at Lucian. But before he could pull the trigger, a blur of motion came from the side. It was Shanice. She didn't have a gun. She had the catering van. She had circled the block. She floored the gas pedal, ramming the van into the side of Marcus's SUV, crushing it against a light pole. Crash. The impact knocked Marcus off his feet. The mercenaries scattered. Now! Lucian yelled. He didn't fire wildly. He moved with the precision of the assassin he used to be. Double tap. Double tap. 2 mercenaries dropped, leg shots disabling them. The neighborhood erupted. It wasn't a gunfight, it was a brawl. Mr. Henderson fired birdshot from the roof, keeping the mercenaries pinned. Big Mike charged, swinging the tire iron. Shanice crawled out of the wrecked van, bleeding from a cut on her forehead. She saw Marcus stumbling to his feet, raising his gun toward Lucian's exposed back. Lucian! She screamed. Lucian spun around, but he was too slow. Marcus had him dead to rights. Goodbye, brother, Marcus snarled. No. The scream didn't come from Shanice. It came from the fire escape. Hannah stood there, holding the railing with white knuckles. She had climbed out the window. Her eyes were locked on the man who had betrayed her father. No. Stop. The voice was clear. Loud. Furious. Marcus flinched. The shock of hearing the mute girl scream froze him for a split second. That second was all Lucian needed. He didn't shoot. He charged. He tackled Marcus, slamming him into the pavement. The rifle skittered away. They fought. It wasn't the elegant martial arts Lucian usually practiced. It was dirty. It was desperate. Marcus punched Lucian in the ribs. Lucian headbutted Marcus, breaking his nose. They rolled in the street, blood mixing with the rainwater. Marcus reached for a knife in his boot. Watch out! Shanice yelled. Lucian saw the glint of steel. He caught Marcus's wrist. He twisted, using the leverage Shanice had taught him. Heavy feet, light heart. He used Marcus's momentum against him, flipping him over. Snap. Marcus screamed as his arm broke. Lucian stood over him, breathing hard, his face bruised and bloody. He picked up the knife Marcus had dropped. Do it. Marcus spat, looking up with hate-filled eyes. Kill me. Prove you're still a monster. Lucian looked at the knife. He looked at Shanice, who was standing by the van, bruised but standing tall. He looked up at the fire escape, where his daughter was watching him. He dropped the knife. No, Lucian said. I am not a monster. I am a father. He turned to Big Mike. Tie him up. The police are coming. Let them have him. Marcus stared in disbelief. The police? You never call the police. I am under new management, Lucian said, looking at Shanice. 6 months later. The Kim estate had changed. The iron gates were still there, but they were open. The cold, sterile silence of the mansion was gone, replaced by the sound of music. It was Sunday, and in Shanice's world Sunday meant dinner. The long mahogany dining table, which used to seat only Lucian in lonely silence, was packed. Shanice sat at the head of the table. Tyrell was next to her, explaining a video game to Big Mike, who was wearing a suit that was slightly too tight. Mrs. Jenkins was there, criticizing the seasoning of the collard greens, even though she had eaten 2 servings. And Lucian. Lucian sat at the other end. He wasn't wearing a tie. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. Pass the kimchi, Tyrell asked. Say please, Shanice corrected. Please, Tyrell grinned. Hannah sat between Lucian and Shanice. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was wearing a bright yellow dress. Dad, Hannah said, her voice clear and bell-like. Can I go to the movies with Tyrell tomorrow? Lucian smiled. Ask Shanice. Shanice looked over the table. She looked at the family they had built. A family made of broken pieces that fit together perfectly. As long as you finish your homework, Shanice said. Later that evening, after the guests had left, Shanice and Lucian stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Marcus was sentenced today, Lucian said quietly. Life without parole. The evidence we stole from the server room put him away for good. Good, Shanice said. He got what he deserved. Lucian turned to her. He took her hand. His fingers were scarred, but his grip was gentle. I have been thinking, he said. The estate is too big. Too quiet. You want to move? Shanice asked. No, Lucian said. I want to fill it. I want to turn the West Wing into a community center. For kids like Tyrell. Kids who need a safe place to go after school. Shanice looked at him, surprise and pride welling up in her chest. That's a really good idea, Lucian. I have the money, Lucian shrugged. But I need someone to run it. Someone who knows the code. Someone who isn't afraid of anything. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. I don't need a governess anymore, Shanice, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I need a partner. In business. In life. He opened the box. It wasn't a diamond. It was a ring made of black metal and emerald green stone. The colors of the night they met. Will you help me build a home inside these walls? Shanice looked at the ring. She looked at the man who had come into her life like a storm and stayed like a shelter. She smiled, the kind of smile that could light up the whole South Side. I ain't going nowhere, boss, she whispered. She kissed him, and for the first time in a long time the hawk didn't bite. The wind was just wind. And they were warm.